I'd like to introduce our presenter, Jeff Coon, Product Management Director. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. So I'd like to welcome to this presentation. We're basically going to be covering some information about how you can create service-related augmented reality experiences. But before we get started, let me introduce myself a little bit. As was just mentioned, my name is Jeff Coon. I'm the Product Management Director here at PTC for the illustration tools, specifically Creo Illustrate in this case. Some of my background, I've actually been in service as either a mechanic, someone creating documentation, and now on the software side for 35 years now. Sometimes it's hard to say that, but I've worked the gambit from one end to the other, and me personally even, I am really excited about what augmented reality brings to this area as far as overcoming some of the issues that I had way back in the 80s when I was a mechanic working on helicopters. So, and as we go through this, I'm going to be referring to some of my own personal experiences in that regard. So as we get started here, what I wanted to talk about is, what is AR, or augmented reality? And basically it's the ability to overlay computer-generated information on top of the real world. Now this differs from virtual reality, where in virtual reality the entire world is created for you out of digital information. In augmented reality, we're actually augmenting your real view of the world. So if you've ever used an app like, to put a piece of furniture in your living room to see what it might look like, or to change the color on the walls if you're thinking about repainting your house and things of that nature, those are all versions of augmented reality. Now what we're going to be going through here today is augmented reality for industry. So this is not necessarily consumer-related augmented reality, but more specific to how manufacturers and service companies and whatnot can use this technology, create content that helps accelerate the maintenance and repair of the equipment that they have out in the field. So an idea of where AR is being used today. Now, this pie chart here is actually reflecting when we went out and asked our customers how they are using augmented reality, these are the results that we got. So you can see a lot of them are fairly evenly spaced, with service and manufacturing taking the lead, but sales and marketing, design, training, operations, and there's always an other at some point. So all of these capabilities, there's a significant use case for being able to do that. And we're going to talk specifically about the service one here. So what are some of the things that augmented reality can actually bring to service? Better fix rates, being able to repair something faster right the first time. I know that back when I was a mechanic, the documentation at that point was still paper. So, we didn't get updates to those paper documents very often. And there would be a lot of times I'd be standing there holding a part in my hand that didn't look anything like what was in the documentation itself, because those changes hadn't got to me yet. But I'm supposed to be comfortable installing this part that doesn't look like what's in the documentation on a multi-million-dollar aircraft that people are going to go fly in. And you don't get that warm, fuzzy feeling that what you're doing is right. With augmented reality, we can actually keep pace with the change of the information. So, it can be less than a week between when the change is available and when it's out in the hands of the people actually doing the work out in the field. You can actually make those transitions that quickly. So having that updated information available to the people out in the field so that they get those first-time fix rates, so that they're comfortable with what it is they're doing, they're confident in their ability to fix this correctly because they have the right information. Now, one of the other things is unlocking knowledge itself. Today we're seeing in the service industry that it's very top heavy with, you know, SMEs or gurus that know everything and have been doing everything for a long time. And a lot of those people are retiring now. And they're retiring at a faster rate than new people are coming on board. And that poses a problem for that knowledge transfer. If you don't have new people to take their place already and have an overlap, there's a potential for some of that knowledge to be lost. Well, again, with augmented reality, you have the ability to in essence, to have an expert with them all the time that can actually be showing them in real time, animated directly on the product that they're working on, what it is they need to be doing. And this has a huge impact, again, on the confidence of somebody that's new. And even like for myself, the difference between expert and novice in this case now filters down to, have you done this task before? Not have you been working on the equipment forever, but have you done this before, or have you done it recently? You know, even for myself, I spent 11 years as an aircraft mechanic, and in that entire time, I replaced the transmission on the helicopter maybe 4 or 5 times. So it's not something I did a lot. So whenever it was needed to be done, you always had to go back to the documentation to make sure that you were doing it right. Well, you have that same scenario here. You might have an expert, generally speaking, but they may never have done this thing before because you know, most of the time it doesn't need to be done. So with augmented reality, even an expert can now have an expert standing there over their shoulder, helping them and showing them exactly what needs to be done. Now, with all of this, you also get that added benefit, especially if you're providing service to someone's equipment or to the end customers. If you're keeping the equipment up longer, if you're fixing it faster with, you know, quicker turnaround times, the likelihood that they're going to renew their contracts, they're going to buy more of your product or newer versions of your product, you know, that all relates back to that overall customer satisfaction with the product, with the service that's applied to it, all of that. So there are a lot of different benefits that come out of using augmented reality for service. So what are some of the real-world benefits that people are seeing using augmented reality? You know, these numbers here that you're seeing are from actual customers. In some cases, these are actually even just proof of concepts. These are not fully tailored out, optimized augmented reality experiences that are already showing these kinds of time savings when it comes to doing the thing. Now, if you think about it from that perspective, if you have 100 service techs out in the field, and on average, you save each one of them only 10 minutes out of a day, that actually equates to 2.5 person days added. So it's like having 2.5 extra people every day out there doing service. If you save them 20 minutes, that's now 5 extra people out there, and so on and so on. So you can see how the augmented reality capability itself allows you to leverage the time better. So you can have more productive people out in the field getting more work done in the same amount of time. So when you're creating this content, where do you start? Well, in this particular scenario, or when we're using Creo Illustrate, we're doing augmented reality primarily from the concept of repurposing 3D model data or CAD data to be able to show people how to do things. Now, with Creo Illustrate, you can bring that CAD data in from pretty much anywhere. Obviously from our own Creo parametric product lines, as well as some of our competitors, we can bring that data in. You can also bring in stuff that's, you know, an OBJ file or an FBX file, IGES, STEP, you know, some of these other common formats to be able to get the data in and produce content. Now later on, Julian is going to show how to actually bring some CAD data in, create some animations, and then after that, Scott is going to show how to actually reuse those animations to create an augmented reality experience. But it's important to understand that, or that we understand that what the engineers provide isn't always everything that you need to create these experiences, such as direction arrows, hand tools, even other things such as, the engineers might have created an assembly, but to create the right augmented reality experience, you might need 4 or 5 different assemblies put together that were never actually put together before on the engineering side. And so Creo Illustrate allows you to do that kind of thing. You can bring in multiple top levels and use them all in a single environment at the same time. And they can all be from different formats as well. So it doesn't all need to come from a single format or a single system. You can pretty much use CAD data or 3D models in general from anywhere. Now, with augmented reality, there's primarily 2 ways or 2 methods of delivering the experience. And by that, I'm talking about how they're actually interacting and consuming it. I'm not referring to the hardware that's being used, such as a phone, a tablet, eyewear, things of that nature. And those 2 primary methods are product overlay, which I'll talk about first, and then tabletop. So with product overlay, as you can see here, this actually is overlaying 3D model-based geometry as well as additional information on top of the real-world product itself. So this allows you to actually show someone how to interact with the content, or excuse me, with the product itself. Now that may be for operational purposes like you're seeing here. How do I configure this generator to run the way I want it to? And it also has the ability to be able to pause what you're seeing, in this case on a tablet, set the tablet down, do that thing, then pick the tablet right back up and continue on. So it's very dynamic in that capability because we do understand that, well, if you're holding the tablet, you're not necessarily going to be able to do the thing it just showed you how to do. So we do give you that ability to pause, set it down, do the thing, then pick it back up, and it will pick up right back where it left off. So it's very intuitive that way. But it's also very powerful to see directly what it is you're doing or what it is you need to do on top of the real world. There's no subject of interpretation anymore of, okay, this is the image I looked at, and now I need to interpret and understand how that relates to the real world that I'm looking at, because it's actually showing you from your point of view exactly what it is. This is where you get into an environment where I don't have the product in front of me, but I still want to understand what it is I might be doing, later on today, or I'm being trained on how to do this on a piece of equipment. And so with tabletop, you're actually generating an image that it's still being projected into your reality, but it's now the full product or a significant portion of the product, depending on how you wanted to do it. So now instead of just seeing the knobs and buttons move, you're actually seeing the entire product and the knobs and buttons move. So it gives you that ability to be able to train someone, even if they don't have the equipment anywhere around, or in a lot of cases, even if the equipment hasn't even been built yet. If you have the 3D models, you can still create a tabletop experience to start getting feedback on, did we create this procedure right? Because you're able to do that basically anywhere. You could be sitting in the living room of your house and drop a generator in your living room and play around with it and see if you understand how to work this procedure. So it makes things very intuitive and to a large extent very organic, because 80% of the information that you receive is visually through your eyes. And so seeing all of this overlaid in the real world, overlaid in the space you're in, where you can actually physically move around it to change your view, to change your perspective, it's game-changing. It really is. Now, basically, I wanted to talk a little bit about our augmented reality suite, in essence. So I've talked a little bit about Creo Illustrate and your ability to repurpose 3D models to create animated content to be able to bring into an augmented reality experience. Now, the other components of this suite is Vuforia Studio. And this is actually where you take that 3D animation that you've created of how you disassemble or assemble, or how you configure or move the switches around, and actually turn it into an augmented reality experience. So this is where you would actually apply the additional labeling. Are there visual instructions that you want them to have or interact with? Acknowledgments. Before you let them go on to the next step, do you want them to acknowledge that they actually did that thing that you just showed them how to do? And it can also reach out and incorporate the Internet of Things. So you can actually reach out and pull streaming data off of products. So in this case, if you're standing in front of a piece of equipment, it may not actually have its own display, but through augmented reality, you can now be standing there in front of it, and you're seeing all the gauges that would have normally been there, so you can get an idea of exactly what the piece of equipment is doing at the time while you're standing right there in front of it. And of course, Vuforia View, which is the delivery end of this suite, which is actually the component that you would have on your phone or a tablet or your wearable that actually lets you see and interact with this content that you just created using Creo Illustrate and Vuforia Studio. Now, with that, I'd like to open it up for questions, keeping in mind that Julian and Scott are actually going to be giving some live demonstrations of these different pieces of software and how you might use those to actually create and manipulate this content. So with that, Stephanie, do we have any questions?
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Yes, so our first one that came in for you is, what is the advantage of product overlay versus tabletop?
Excellent question. And to be honest, to an extent, that's kind of a business question or a business decision that needs to be made. They both have their strengths. So if you're looking at product overlay, you need to have the real piece of equipment to be able to overlay the augmented reality experience on top of. Now again, this is very powerful, especially if you're actually out there in the field doing the service. In essence, there's no question, because you're literally showing them on the equipment exactly which nuts, bolts, washers, switches, parts they need to be pulling off or installing in real time. But tabletop also has its benefits in that, again, you can actually be reviewing information, you can be training people on things, even for like sales and marketing. Tabletop has a lot of power there. If you think about it, if you go to a trade show or something like that, and they have all this equipment laid out on the floor, it's actually very expensive to ship that equipment to those things. And a lot of times they have to try and decide, if we've got 10 different products, which one or two are we actually going to send to a trade show? So if you can bring all of them with you on your tablet and show any one of your products right there on the trade floor, then it changes everything. We've had customers that have already started doing this that create custom configurations for things. So they might not even create the base product. So they might have one version of the base product, but then they use product overlay, augmented reality, to show all the various configurations of equipment that they would surround it with. But if they wanted to, in a sales meeting, they could actually pull up the piece of equipment, literally put it on the table in front of everybody, and let everybody see it and all the various configurations. Having that type of view of the product is very powerful. much more so than seeing photographs of it or having to, travel several hours to see one in the real world kind of thing. So augmented reality lends itself very well to that. And you can use both. So it all depends on what your expectation is. Do you have the real product or not? But both will give you the full value of being able to use augmented reality. So I hope that answered that question without being too lengthy anyway.
Thanks, Jeff. That was very informative. The next question that came in is, are there additional challenges associated with creating either product overlay or tabletop AR experiences?
Additional challenges, between the two of them, not really. Because like if we go back to this scenario where we're using Creo Illustrate and Vuforia Studio, in Creo Illustrate you would be creating your animated content, and you can actually create that seeing the full product, because in that case you're going to create your initial view of it in essence the tabletop type view, and then you just hide all the parts that you don't need for product overlay views. So there's not really anything extra that needs to be done other than that last step to hide all the parts of the geometry that you don't need to be seeing when you're doing a product overlay. So they're actually both quite easy to do. You're still just creating animated content, and then what you show at the end, whether it's product overlay or tabletop, that is what you then bring into Vuforia Studio to configure the rest of your experience and how they interact with that experience.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And for our last question, we have several people asking if these tools will work with third-party CAD. Can you address this for us?
Yeah. So, again, Creo Illustrate has multiple direct imports, and for those formats that we don't directly import, we do have what we call CAD adapters. So these are adapters that would go on the actual third-party CAD seat, allowing you to export from that CAD seat as a native Creo Illustrate type file. Now, along with that, Vuforia View itself can also import data. So if you just need to, in essence, show a product model sitting there on the floor, but it doesn't require any animations and things like that. You just want to have the additional information. You want to be able to show them this is what it looks like, or maybe the only thing you want to apply to it is have it change colors kind of thing, so that they can see it in various colors or various finishes that they might want to order the product in. And in those kind of scenarios, you can actually just bring the data directly into Vuforia View to create your augmented reality experience. But in either case, yes, we are very flexible with what kind of CAD data can be brought in. And again, we also support some of the general formats, such as IGES, STEP, again OBJ, FBX, and things of that nature. So even if we can't pull it in that native format, there's a way for us to get it in.